Boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon, everybody. This talk will be held in English because we have with us the American romance author Lynn Solomon, well known for writing about imperfect people falling in love. Her books have been translated in more than 15 languages, including Portuguese. And maybe we could start. Hello, Rachel.
Hello. I was almost worried you were going to start in Portuguese, and I was like, oh no, that's the one thing I didn't make notes on.
It would be a prank, it wouldn't be a very good idea. Well, in Portugal, three of your books are translated into Portuguese, and these are your books written for adults. But you started out by writing books for a younger crowd, and you still do write those books. And I know some people, when you started out writing books for adults, asked you if you would stop writing books for kids. Do you think that the young adult genre and as a consequence that age group is still considered less important by our society?
Yeah, so it is funny because when you start out writing books for children and then all of a sudden you also start publishing books for adults, people think, oh, now you're writing serious books. You're writing real books now. This is something that we can understand because you're writing this for us. And I mean, the joke in there is you've been writing real books this whole time. I mean, they have a cover, they have pages in the middle, there's a story, there's characters. And what I've found from doing both books for teens and for adults is that it's the books for teens that really have the potential to make the biggest impact. I mean, not only are you reaching teenagers at this really vulnerable time when they're kind of on the precipice of adulthood, but I feel that, writing books for teens and romance for adults, these are some of the most inclusive, the most diverse books out there right now. And there are just so many ways that teenagers can find stories that relate to them and that give them the kind of language to describe not just their emotions, their mental health, which is a huge part of my books, their sexuality. There is just so many ways to feel seen. And I almost consider the act of writing for teenagers more serious than writing for adults because you do feel like you have a bit of a responsibility. And it's balancing wanting to tell a good story and wanting it to feel like this positive lesson they can take away. I say lesson in quotes because you never want your book to feel preachy.
But is it so? It's something you have in mind. You don't want to tell. You just don't want to tell just a story. You want to give a message, tell them something.
In a way, yes. My most recent release is about two characters who are navigating a long-distance relationship in college. And what I really wanted to show is what a healthy relationship looks like to teenagers. These two characters have been together for a while, and this charts them throughout a year of their relationship. And while not outright telling them, like, this is the way you deserve to be treated, I wanted to show this, softness and understanding and mutual respect and the levels and depth of communication that these two characters can have, and hopefully have teenagers internalize that this is something that they deserve, that they want, and that they can ask for without spelling it out.
What about women? Because your protagonists are usually women. Do you think these books are also looked upon as minor? You're already nodding.
Yes,
so.
Yes. I mean, the number of times that as a romance author, you tell someone that's what you write, and they say, oh, so you write books with, Fabio on the cover. You write books with shirtless men on the cover. And first of all, that just shows that they don't quite have an understanding of what the current romance landscape is like, because that's not really what books look like anymore. But also romance is one of the, if not the biggest, portion of the market in terms of readership, I actually found a statistic from July of this year.
Very well documented, perfect.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to forget, but the 34% of fiction sales were romance. And it's been a huge portion of the market for a long time, and TikTok has of course grown that considerably. But I really think that there is this temptation in society to look down on things that are geared toward a feminine audience, whether it is a romance novel, a boy band, a reality show. It's as though these types of things are not like considered serious by the powers that be, and therefore they don't have value.
Or important.
Exactly. When all of the romance novels that I read, all the romance novels that I write, they all contain, serious plots about mental health, about grief, people learning to become new types of families, people are caring for each other, and like these just very basic human relationships that are not necessarily just romantic, and I don't think anything about that is unserious.
And by those numbers, it has this huge audience, a third of the audience, 34%. I was listening to you, and I was wondering, have you always been so affirmative, so clear about what you wanted to say? Because maybe this is a time to tell our audience or remind those who already knew this, but Rachel, well, you were born in Seattle, the city of grunge. You were part of, as a girl, you were part of an all-girl punk rock band, and you participated in the largest concentration of natural red-headed people in the world, and you're in the Guinness Book of Records.
I was in the Guinness
Book. There was another concentration.
Someone broke the record. I will have another chance next year.
We're cheering for you.
Thank you.
So these are all aspects that, well, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, show a great appreciation for difference. Were you always happy to be different and and did you always understand the value of difference and of being yourself?
So I love this question because like you said, I grew up in Seattle. And as a millennial, I think that I was very focused on being as unique as possible. And anything that I did that was remotely mainstream, I felt that was boring. Like that was not an interesting thing to be. You didn't want to kind of be just one of the crowd. Like I was, sitting in my bedroom listening to The Cure and the Smiths and thinking that I was the first person to ever discover them, which is it's required in Seattle. If you're growing up there, you have to be a music snob. So, I had that down.
You were in the right city.
Yeah. I never would have been caught dead reading a book with a pink cover in school. I grew up reading a lot of young adult and romance, but as soon as I got to high school, I was like, I am only going to read the classics. Like, give me any book by an old white man, and that is my new favorite book.
For instances, what did you read at the time?
I mean, Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald,
all the classics.
Yeah, Dickens. Yeah. Like, was I happy reading them? No, but I thought that that's what I had to do to be taken seriously as like an intellectual.
You were an adolescent.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
And like you said, I was in this like terrible punk rock band, writing all these songs about boys that didn't like me back. And it honestly wasn't until my mid-20s that I started wondering why. Like, why was I so obsessed with this idea of being special, whether it was being a redhead and being in the Guinness Book of World Records, or what. And I also thought, if I liked something mainstream, if I shopped at a certain store or liked a certain musician, what if I do it wrong? Like, what if I try to imitate these ideals of girlhood and femininity that I'm seeing around myself, and I don't do it correctly? And the idea of failing and someone perceiving that I was making this effort and not doing it well, that was just the most mortifying thing that I could imagine. And then I think just gradually in my 20s, like I started letting myself enjoy things that teenager Rachel missed out on. Like I started reading romance again. Not to be the second or possibly third person to bring up Taylor Swift, but like I started listening to Taylor Swift, which I had not done as a teenager because that seemed very uncool. And then if you look at my books, I have at least 3 with pink covers. So, everything kind of comes full circle in a way. And, even today as a writer, I try to give my main characters these unique traits. And balancing that with a sense of some of the insecurities that I felt as a teenager, but also some of the growth that I didn't have a chance to do until I was in my 20s. So I do have a main character in one of my books, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, who wants to become a romance author. Write what you know. And she feels a lot of shame because her friends are very judgmental, her family is very judgmental, and throughout the course of the book, she gains the confidence to embrace this thing that she loves and be open about it with the people in her life. And it's a journey that I wish I had gone on a little sooner. And I think it's just, the romance genre in particular these days is really all about like embracing things that bring us joy without, hopefully without a fear of shame or a fear of judgment. And I think it's like, maybe 15 years too late for me to have experienced it as a teenager, but I love that it's happening now and that I can be on the creator side.
Mm-hmm. You look at it with different eyes, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so being less hard on yourself, maybe this is the...
Sometimes, yeah.
Maybe that's the message. Well, in your books, and I'm thinking about the X talk that I read, in Portuguese it's called Fala com o X. A turning point in the 2 main characters' relationship happens when they manage to become or to be more honest and to become more vulnerable while talking to each other. In other words, they develop a kind of emotional intimacy. At these times of, social media is everywhere. Not only young adults, but also adults all have, or the majority, surfs social media. Maybe it became, for many, the only thing they use the internet for. But these media are media where everything is perfect. There are filters for everything, formulas. In your opinion, thinking of social media or taking social media into consideration and the way people are growing up nowadays, how are we in that field of honesty, vulnerability, and, intimacy?
I really think it has more of a positive impact than negative. Because at least what I see when I'm on social media are people who are connecting with these books because they've never seen themselves in the pages before. My books have characters with, various mental illnesses. I mean, part of my way of coping with my own stuff is like with humor. So I just like take a little piece of my mental illness and sprinkle it throughout my various books. I had never really read modern books with Jewish characters until I started writing my own. So that's another piece of it. But, you see readers, connecting with books about queerness, characters of color that have not been as center stage as they have been in the past, or that are more center stage now. And I feel like there are just so many communities for people to connect in online, and the romancing young adult communities that I see, on social media are all about, like I was saying, embracing these things that you love without shame and just sort of celebrating this pure love.
So you look at social media as a means for people to gather around something they liked, as a means to find their niche. Maybe you would have appreciated that while as a teenager.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that there aren't, toxic elements, but I think that the way that it has brought readers together and also engaged younger and younger readers, the number of Gen Z readers that I see at my events, that I see online, it really kind of blows my mind sometimes. I think because it's very typical, right, to think of the younger generation than you as being like cooler. So then when I see Gen Z readers come to my events who just like look cool, I'm like, oh, I'm like, you're too cool to read my books. Like my books were for like the nerdy kids.
So maybe
but all are welcome.
maybe kids are not afraid to be who they are.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, what about your personal experiences? You've moved to Amsterdam 3 years ago. Has this did it have any kind of influence in your writing, in your look towards the world and the way you interpret things, living in Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as I announced on social media that I was moving there, people said, when are you going to write a book set there? And I said, I have not gotten on the plane yet, but maybe one day. And yeah, 3 years later, I've now drafted a book, and it's coming out next year that takes place in Amsterdam. So I think there is something that's very inspiring about it. It's just the architecture and the canals, but it's also just inspired me to learn more about not just different people's upbringings, but that too, since it is such an international city, but how the publishing world works in other countries. And
is it very different?
It is. In the United States, pretty much everyone needs a literary agent, and I know that's not as common in Portugal. It's not as common in the Netherlands. It's pretty rare. And just the process of translation, which is really fascinating to me, and the fact that I got off the plane and I saw a Portuguese edition of my book at the airport bookstore. Like it's just kind of incredible that this thing that I wrote in Seattle has now followed me across the world. So I think also there's something really exciting about realizing, when I moved to the Netherlands, I had just turned 30, and you really think that your personality is set at a certain point. You're like, okay, I've had these experiences, and like I know that I'm kind of a homebody, and I don't really like to travel, and I don't really like to put on hard pants. Like I just want to be comfortable all the time. And then you get a chance like this to move across the world, and I had never been to Europe before I got off the plane. And just the opportunities that it has opened up in terms of travel, in terms of meeting people from different cultures, it has completely shifted who I am. So to know that my personality and like who I am at my core was capable of changing and becoming someone who loves to travel and who loves exploring and trying new things, when I would just so often give an automatic no. Back when I lived in Seattle, sitting in my sweatpants and not wanting to leave the apartment.
It was raining all the time.
It is in Amsterdam too.
That's true.
But I think it's that kind of growth and that kind of change. I thought I had a finite number of experiences that I could write about in Seattle. And not that everyone needs to move halfway across the world so that they can, write their next book. But it did, it really just helped me understand that it sounds so obvious, but like the world was so much bigger than just my little office in my apartment.
That's so interesting you say that, and we're right at the end of this conversation, but the topic is inclusiveness. We are infinite, and I thought about it as a diversity of people, but what you're saying is that we have many, many people inside ourselves as well. We just have to find them out.
No, absolutely, and sometimes it's, I guess, as simple as moving across the world, but also, books really act as that, really help us explore. They reflect back something that we have experienced, but also enable us, of course, to experience something.
To travel.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.